Great, well thanks everyone for coming. My name's Simon and I'm a psychiatric doctor based here in South East London. And I work at the Maudsley Hospital and do research at King's College London and the Institute of Psychiatry.
Everybody, I'm Nige Netzband. I'm a research psychologist. I've been working in designing experiments for quite a few years now, and I'm currently a DPsych candidate as well. For the last few years, Simon and I have been designing a few studies into ayahuasca, so we're going to talk you through two of them now.
Great, so to begin with, we'd like to speak about our first study, which was into the effects of ayahuasca on personality. We were actually looking at the use of ayahuasca in an adapted Shipibo setting for ayahuasca tourists, so that's retreat centres, and this was an independently funded pilot study, actually funded by ourselves. And at the time, we didn't have any academic affiliations. We were looking at whether or not personality correlated with changes in perceived mystical experience, assessing personality immediately before, after, and 6 months after an ayahuasca retreat. We're then going to move on in the last part of our talk to talk about our latest current study, which is funded by the Medical Research Council, which is part of the UK government, and it's currently in data collection. And I'd like to point out that we're not coming here as experts today, and we're very much still learning, and we'd like to share what we've come across so far. So before we get going, I'd like to ask the question of what is ayahuasca? Now this is an incredibly complex question that could never be summed up with one slide. In fact, nor could it be summed up with 100 slides. Ayahuasca is many different things to many different people, and I'm going to be coming at it from a Western point of view, a scientific point of view, so please do bear that bias in mind. Basically, it's a mix of the Amazonian vine, Banisteriopsis caapi, and most commonly that's mixed with Psychotria viridis, which contains DMT or dimethyltryptamine, which is a psychedelic. It loosely translates to the vine of the rope or dead, and individuals who consume ayahuasca quite often have profound changes in sensory perception, which includes thinking and emotion. This can lead to purging, that can be vomiting, diarrhea, crying, visions, introspection, or connection with the divine. Ayahuasca can be used for many different things, as a medicine, as a sacrament, for spiritual development, for scientific inquiry, or more recently and controversially, for adventure tourism or pilgrimage. And before we go any further, I'd like to just touch on ayahuasca tourism. I don't think it would be right to talk about this research with at least introducing some of the issues that are associated. Again, this is a huge topic, and we're going to be really quickly brushing over some of them. There's been increasing numbers of people who have been taking ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest over the last few years. Many argue that this is creating a demand which is different from actual traditions, and therefore diluting the traditions that people are experiencing. There are concerns in regards to the environment, in regards to parts of the Amazon being cut down for retreat centres, for long distance travel, for ayahuasca tourists going over, and also debate over whether or not ayahuasca can be sustainably harvested. There are safety concerns. Ayahuasca is largely unregulated in South America. Issues regarding psychological, physical, sexual and financial exploitation can occur. Unfortunately, sexual exploitation is no longer a rare occurrence in some of these settings, and there's some nice guidelines produced by Shakruna.net which speak about ways that you can reduce the chance of sexual abuse occurring, especially for young females. There's also an ethical code that's been produced by plantiforma.org, which has suggestions on how ayahuasca ceremonies could or should be run. In addition to this, there are risks with ayahuasca becoming a commodification. Is this just a case of cultural appropriation? Is it biological piracy? Is it people who aren't locals are taking ayahuasca and using the knowledge, leaving locals disadvantaged? Is this a new form of colonialism, neo-colonialism, with a market that's not controlled by locals? Some have argued that there's destabilisation of communities in the jungle as a result of ayahuasca tourism, due to the tourists coming over or the large amounts of money that are now going into these communities. Having said that, many people get a lot of healing, meaning and community out of these retreats. There's a reason people are going. And there's a quote here I think is quite interesting to consider. Ayahuasca tourism may even contradict some of the core values associated with ayahuasca.
Okay, so I'm going to talk you through the outline of our first paper. So this is the ayahuasca personality study. So the reasons why we conducted the research were to add to the growing body of knowledge. As we know, there is agreement attention going towards psychedelics at the moment, so we thought we'd do our part in trying to help out with some research with ayahuasca. So the first study was looking at potential changes in personality after ayahuasca consumption. So this has been demonstrated with other similar compounds such as psilocybin and LSD. Maclean et al., team at Johns Hopkins, found that a single high dose of psilocybin resulted in significant increase in levels of openness. And a study by David Arizzo at Imperial College in London found that high dose psilocybin resulted in significant reductions in levels of neuroticism in treatment-resistant depression patients. So we were using this general framework for the ayahuasca study. We aim to look at potential future directions for clinical applications, and also to investigate the role of the mystical experience in determining outcomes and our personality images. We were looking at the concept of setting, so the incorporation of traditional elements. Obviously this was done in a traditional-esque retreat site. So looking at how the principles of those spiritual elements aid in the outcomes in terms of setting. And also we conducted the research in Peru, partially because it's legal and we wouldn't face any legal repercussions in doing that. So yeah, the setting. As Simon mentioned, it's an adapted Shipibo framework that's designed for ayahuasca tourists. And yeah, the idea was that a peak or mystical experience would be further reduced in this type of setting rather than a clinical setting. The site where we were at used experienced practitioners, so it was a lineage of Shipibo curanderos, or shamans. And the site was based in the El Poblado Mashana National Reserve. It's about 2 hours away from Iquitos in northeast Peru. It's a community of about 80 people. It's about 6 families. At the site, there's no electricity, no phone signal, no internet, nothing like that. So participants there are quite off the grid. And the site where we were conducting the data collection is the MAPS affiliated research centre known as Neuroticism, part of the Ayahuasca Foundation. So here's the location of the site. Northeast Peru in the jungle. And the hypothesis for our personality paper was that we'd see significant increases in levels of openness, and as I mentioned before, this is based on the Maclean findings. We expected that these changes would be sustained at a 6-month follow-up, and we expected that the extent of perceived mystical experience would relate to more pronounced changes in personality, i.e. the higher level that an individual experienced what is described as a mystical experience, so feelings of transcendence, unity, ego dissolution, euphoria, the classic psychedelic experience. The more someone experienced that, the more pronounced the changes would be. And we also expected that we may see some changes in neuroticism, which was based on the Arizzo findings. So a little overview of our methodology. Let's just go on. Yeah. So it was an observational repeated measures design. Most of you might know what that is, but basically we did baseline reading before any ayahuasca ceremonies. Then we tested people again at the end of a retreat, and once again 6 months later to establish long-term changes. So each of the retreats lasted 12 days, and that consisted of 6 ayahuasca ceremonies. During the time of the retreat, we conducted semi-structured interviews. This was usually after a participant had a profound ceremony. And this was, the findings from this were published in a separate publication by our good friend and colleague, Tom John Wolf, who unfortunately can't be here. It's breaking convention, so we thought we'd go more serious matters. So here's a photo of the Rationale Reserve, or part of the community. And this is the MAPS affiliated research centre, which we were based at, which is beautiful, paradise. So our sample group. So for this study it was quite small. It was 24 people, 15 male, 9 female, an average age of around 38. Primarily Western population, and all the people we tested were vetted by the Ayahuasca Foundation, so that's the organisation, the retreat site, not us. We were there mainly as observing scientists. 12 12 of the participants had historical or ongoing diagnosed psychiatric conditions. 5 of them had chronic ongoing physical ailments. 9 had previous physical ailments, which were resolved by the time they arrived at the retreat. And 4 had no diagnosed history of either physical or psychiatric conditions. 6 of the participants were psychedelic naive. 10, so that was in, they hadn't experienced LSD, psilocybin, anything related. 10 had experience with those sorts of compounds, and 8 had experience with ayahuasca already. So the measures that we used were the NEOPI, some of you might know, or most of you maybe. It's the Big 5-factor model personality. It's the acronym OCEAN, so 5 primary personality traits. It's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And then we used a mystical experience questionnaire to measure the extent of the mystical experience. And that was the MQ32.
Great, so moving on to our results. So in the short term, immediately after the ayahuasca retreat, we saw statistically significant reductions in how neurotic the participants were. And what's more, that was correlated with whether or not they perceived themselves to have undergone a mystical experience. In the long term, so 6 months later, we found that those reductions were maintained. In regards to agreeableness, we found statistically significant increases, again, immediately after the retreat in the short term. However, this was not found to correlate with the score on the mystical experience questionnaire. Again, at 6 months, this increase was maintained. We also found some trend level increases in openness. So this means that participants did score more openly in regards to that personality domain. However, because of our small sample size, we were unable to make that generalization to the larger community. Here we have a pictorial representation that shows the decrease in neuroticism and also the increase in agreeableness. And again, here we can see the negative correlation between neuroticism and mystical experience, showing that the greater the score on the mystical experience questionnaire, the greater the reduction in regards to neuroticism.
So a few little additional points on the concept of the mystical experience. So the findings that we got were in line with the literature that suggests the importance of a mystical experience in determining therapeutic outcomes. So as I mentioned before, this is associated with loss of sense of self, the classic ego dissolution, and those classic experiences that relate to psychedelics. This has been linked to a decrease in default mode network functional connectivity. That was conducted by, well, it's quite a few papers on that, the primary one's the Carter-Harris paper from April. And this has also been shown with other 5-HT2A agonists, such as LSD and psilocybin. The concept of mystical experiences have been incorporated into the MAPS psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy protocol. And it must be noted that similar states of mind have been observed through natural practices such as meditation and yoga, and also certain breathwork exercises such as holotropic breathing. A few little discussion points. So the reductions in neuroticism, which was the most primary finding I got, were in line with the David Rizzo paper and also suggest potential therapeutic applications for ayahuasca. Obviously with this current paper we weren't looking at direct clinical applications, but it's implicit in relating to conditions that relate to neurosis, so affective disorders, things like anxiety, depression. The findings weren't directly in line with the findings by Maclean et al., which found significant increase in openness, as I mentioned before. But as we stated, we did see some trend level increases, but the hypothesis wasn't fully matched. And yeah, in this type of format, it was difficult to determine what was related to substance, i.e. the ayahuasca, or the retreat format itself, and other variables that were associated with that type of practice. A few limitations of this study. Due to the nature of it and it being independently funded, we had quite limited access to equipment. So we couldn't run things like epigenetics or pharmacokinetics, which we would like to have done, and we have incorporated into our subsequent study. During these retreats, there was no set doses of ayahuasca. If any of you guys have done ayahuasca retreats, you will know how it works. A shaman will give you how much ayahuasca you're supposed to be doing that day, and it's up to you how much you're going to drink, so we weren't recording the amounts. Furthermore, we couldn't have the ayahuasca analysed. We'd like to over the time, but we had some logistical issues and we couldn't get it analysed in the end, unfortunately. The sample group was recruited on a basis of trust, so we didn't look at medical records, anything like that. It was all word of mouth, so we had to take people on face value. And also, the sample group was subject to self-selection bias in the sense that these individuals who paid inside of a retreat come out to the journal on their own, so we weren't recruiting from a broad range of the population. The sample group was fairly small, 24, but we did cater for this in the statistical analysis in tighter parameters. And we couldn't control for any potential confounding variables between the post-ayahuasca reading, so immediately after the retreats, and the 6-month follow-up. So anything like meditative practices, any other spiritual practices, potential other psychoactive ingestion, things like this. So there was quite a lot of variables in the last confinement.
So we're just going to spend the last part of our talk introducing our current study. So this study is using the same setting, looking at trauma and trauma-related conditions. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Professor Celia Morgan for supervising this one, who couldn't be here today, and also to the Medical Research Council for funding it, which none of us ever thought would happen. Okay, so the aims of this study were to look at the long and the short-term impact of an ayahuasca retreat in this framework on mental health and well-being outcomes, and to compare this to the amount of trauma that individuals had experienced in childhood. In addition to this, we also wanted to see the extent to which overgeneralized autobiographical memory recall and mystical experiences mediated the changes that were seen. So we hypothesise that ayahuasca in this setting will have a positive impact on participants' mental health outcomes. So that's anxiety, depression, self-compassion. And then this will be mediated by the severity of childhood trauma. So those who have had more childhood trauma, we'd expect to see greater changes in regards to their depression, anxiety, and self-compassion. We also hypothesise that these changes will be mediated by autobiographical memory. So research has shown that autobiographical memory becomes more generalised when people are suffering from trauma or anxiety or depression. So we expect that these changes will be associated with memory becoming more specific. And again, like all psychedelic research, we'll compare that to the mystical experience because this is well known. We also expect that these changes will be maintained at 6-month follow-up. So the methodology of this study, it's an observational repeated measures design similar to our previous study. We've collected data from 65 participants in the short term so far. We have more quantitative measures this time that we can see on this slide. And again, we're collecting qualitative data in the form of semi-structured interviews. We've also collected DNA samples from each of these participants, and we're going to be looking for epigenetic changes. That's actually taking place separately at the University of Exeter in the genetics lab, and as of yet we haven't actually come to a decision on what we're going to be looking at, so if anyone has any ideas, then we're all ears. And I just want to finish off on one final point. Is ayahuasca research in this setting ethical? We can't deny there's been an increasing number of people who are using these retreat centres, therefore surely data is required to see what the outcomes are, risks and benefits. There's also been a stagnation in treatment development in psychiatric healthcare. Could ayahuasca give some ideas about where we should go next? Having said that, there's risk of medicalisation. I think that most people here will probably agree they don't want to see ayahuasca in the hands of big pharma. There's lots of anecdotal and media claims of both healing and harming. Surely it would be good to try and establish the truth behind some of these claims. By doing this research, are we just sidestepping issues of cultural appropriation? Is it that Westerners or ayahuasca tourists are going and having an existential crisis due to lack of spirituality in their home nations? Is it the indigenous who have had to endure people trying to take their land and their resources now have to see people trying to take the immaterial, the spirituality, knowledge? There's also issues to do with trying to fit ayahuasca into a Western scientific paradigm. When you try and do that, there's this massive oversimplification. Are we losing some of the mystery and the magic by doing that? Almost definitely yes. There's also issues in regards to reciprocity. Who benefits? We give money, we give money quite generously. We try and give our time. I'll put some websites up of organisations that we think are good to either volunteer for or donate to. But is that a fair exchange for potentially hundreds or even thousands worth of years of knowledge? That being said, this work does follow the current trend of the psychedelic renaissance, which has gained a lot of attention over the last few years. Research into psilocybin and LSD is showing great promise with therapeutic outcomes, and ayahuasca surely is up there with these other substances. We've seen an integration of traditions such as yoga and mindfulness into Western culture. These are really beneficial for a lot of people, but again, trying to fit them in to a Western culture, are we losing some of the original meaning behind them? Maybe. There's been a shift in attitudes towards organic medicines, and we can see that based in England with CBD, we can see that in changes in laws in the United States. Some people therefore think that ayahuasca could be a magic bullet, healing lots of things. And I want to end on this quote, because I think that last point is quite dangerous, and Bia Bache actually sums it up quite nicely when she says, ayahuasca will probably not solve world hunger problems, but it is much more than an antidepressant. Thanks very much.